Hey everyone, I'm Noctis Corvus, but you can call me Noctis. This week we have something a little bit different, and, well, also something a fair bit longer than I usually seem to work on around here. But that is because this idea has been a fair moment in the making. See, I have often wondered about the point of those 30-day art challenges that you see online and that are found quite easily about here and there. Typically, the one that comes to mind is Inktober, which takes place during October, since there are also a few other variations of the October challenge theme to work within. Just off the top of my head, there are challenges that look at gore and horror, and really whatever else there is for October alone. Other challenges within this sort of realm tends to be things like Mermaid, where there'll be a 30-day prompt list for mermaids during the month of May. But October is really the one that comes to mind. Anyway though, I often tend to look at these challenges, and I kind of wonder why someone would want to do them, or at least I wonder what the point of such a challenge is. Why someone does it is really personal and up to them, so I really tend to wonder more the point of the challenge, and what's the appealing factor with them. Usually it is more about the appeal. I mean, I have personally tried it before, when I didn't really share my work on social media, and I found that I only got stressed by it. And I also found myself far more inclined to burn out when I kind of gave it all a go. In all of my past attempts, I have failed around day 5, and I've never gotten back to the challenge since I don't see much of a point to it after I fail that one day. All it really ever gave me was burnout and art block, so I kinda didn't understand the appeal. And that is how we ended up here. I decided that, to try this and work it out, I would give the idea a go in my own manner and on my own terms. This means that I decide the prompts, the goals, and what classifies as a day as a complete or as a success. It also means that, personally, I decide what means a day has failed and how many failed days it takes for me to consider the overall challenge as a failure. So get comfy and maybe get some snacks, as this video is then a lot longer than I came to anticipate here. But anyway, starting off and looking at the process, we first needed a prompt list to begin anything. I needed something to look at every day and to kind of work from, since most of these 30-day formats will see a prompt list given for others to follow. If I want to work out the point of such a challenge, it seemed only fair that I work from one, or I have one present throughout all of this, and I had to decide if I made it or if I found one from a previous challenge like this. And at first I did consider maybe finding the older one from some other 30-day challenge and going from there. But then I paused, and I kind of asked myself why I would do that, and what the purpose that it was serving. The answer was simply because that is what it looks like you are meant to do for these challenges. You're meant to go and find a list by somebody else and work with the prompts given to you. But looking over some of those other lists, I didn't find one that stood out to me, or inspired me for the majority of the list at all. I also then tend to know myself a little bit too well at times. If I have a list of words that I don't like, then I will be less inclined to work on this challenge the further I go into it. So it would end up as this uphill battle between motivation to finish the challenge and inspiration to get the prompts done. I'd end up in the later days working to finish the prompts and to check them off as a list, rather than actually trying to explore them to their fullest potential. That isn't really the goal here though, and I kind of wanted to avoid that as much as I could. So, one afternoon, I sat down and I started to plan out various words that could help me build my own prompt list, just to try and minimise that issue further down the line. And truthfully, I think I actually had the most fun of this challenge making said list. Now, I know that off the bat that sounds really bad. The part that I enjoyed most was before this challenge even began. I had the most fun with this more than any other day. Yet I think there are a couple of reasons that I enjoyed the planning for this, more than actually executing each and every idea every day. Most of those reasons I can get into a bit later, since we certainly have appropriate time. Yet the list was just a jumble of words. I could decide it to be whatever I wanted, and each word wasn't anything just yet. They were just words on a blank page and forming a mind map, basically. At this point, it was all the concept, and I still wasn't sure if I was going to see any of it through. For all I knew, I could have started preparing this, tried the first 10 days, and then, again, ended up hating it and stopped. I could have gone 15 days and burnt out, and then this video could have been a very different ending, with the discussion more of that failure and more about talking about the challenge overall from a very different perspective. But for this list, before it even began, there was a potential and things to come. There was an unknown that I was excited to see how it would play out. I simply just liked it, as I was looking forward to working with these words a bit more and in more depth. And I also just simply had fun making the mind map and making it all look nicer once I had chosen the words. It's quite rare that I get to do that. I could pick the colours I liked, decorated it whatever way I pleased, and that was all it really had to be. Just a pretty list of words that meant absolutely nothing until I began to develop it all. And also, I did this all before the months began by quite a few weeks, so it was all still a little ways off that I would be starting it too. So there wasn't even a sense of rush or panic, and it wasn't like a night before the first day type of thing. But alongside this, I also had to work out the rules that I would be following for this, and kind of that I would be keeping to. I chose to set these up ahead of time just to be sure that I would have some sort of boundaries to work within, so that it was still a challenge. I didn't write down the obvious rules, like the fact that it must be 30 consecutive days, but I did note down the details that I thought would make this doable. The first is that any form of art, any medium, would be allowed and it would count. And I would even encourage myself to explore new materials and new methods of art that I haven't really explored before. This was mainly so that I didn't get stuck in a pattern of always doing the same thing, and then further down the line come to feel obligated to continue with said pattern. I mean, I know now that I do most of this digitally, but the rule was there so that I never felt that it had to be digital, and that I could break it at any point and any time that I so chose to. I could, in theory, do 29 days in one medium, yet it wouldn't be a failure if I did the final one day in something else. In truth, I also added this rule since I did want to explore more forms of art in the long run, and I actually did have that as a goal going into it. I will likely touch on it a bit later, but I went into this with the intent to experiment, and to just have fun without worrying about mistakes or making a mess of things. I also went into it not really intending for things to be finished or refined. Yet this was then part of the second rule, which was the main and most important rule that I came to set. The day doesn't have to end in a rendered image. This means that I don't need a drawing at the end of the day that would be considered finished, like fully shaded or with any sort of final effects that I enjoy. I figured that I could consider a day a success as long as I had a sketch, an early idea, or something simply that I could see myself exploring at a later date. I set this rule since, again, something that I will likely come back to later, I often see these 30-day art challenges where people are sharing fully finished pieces of art every single day for 30 days. One drawing alone can take hours, and this would kind of mean that, for me, it's all I would be doing for the next 30 days. And that would be just to ensure that I was semi-okay with each outcome that I made. And I would really just see myself burning out the more that I did that. I would end up with images that were half done that I wouldn't like, and images that felt rushed or messy and just overall not something I'd be proud of. So, this rule became very important for reasons that will be very evident as we go along here. I also think that it's one of the main reasons I was able to actually finish this challenge in the first place. The final two rules were then kind of the same. I would allow myself to catch up on days if I missed them, simply so that I didn't forget one day and then never come back to this challenge, which is also something that I have done in the past. It also means that if I had a day that was super busy, and one where I genuinely couldn't fit this into any of the plans at the time, then I would have the ability to go back as needed to, and as I wanted to, without really considering the task failed under my own rule set. Is this a little bit against the challenge? Yes. Which is then where Rule 4 came into play, and that was that fun came first. I do all of this because I enjoy it, and I don't see the fun in forcing myself to fail because of outside circumstance. So if I missed a day because I didn't want to do it and I couldn't be bothered, then it would probably come to count as a failure because my motivation was the issue. If I had things to do or outside factors that hindered me, then I can't really consider that as my own fault, so I don't see how it would be my own failure either. Other than maybe the lack of foresight and planning, yet there are some things in our house that you just can't plan for. Either way though, this rule became a little bit useless anyway, since I was at least able to start each day's sketch before midnight, which is all that counted. That kind of became an unspoken rule 3.5, if you will, that as long as it was before midnight of any given day and it hadn't technically turned over to the next, then it counted as the day the number said. If the number of the day was on the calendar, then it counted, and that was the end of discussion. And yes, the odd day here or there saw me sketching ideas at 1 AM, yet those ones always started on the actual day itself, which kept with rule 3.5, and I don't really count that as catching up anyway because it started on the relevant day. But anyway though, with these two sheets made and the rules laid out, I felt that I could quite strongly start the challenge when the 1st of March rolled around a couple of weeks later. Now, this may be a bit of a strange approach to this, but I want to discuss the challenge itself before going into the days and the sketches. I mean, I already had a whole other script and approach for this video, one where I went through each day and I spoke a bit about the ideas and the process. Yet that ended up abandoned because it got really, really long. I mean, this one is long, but the other one was ending up at about double of this, hence this change in approach. It would also feel strange talking about sections of days without the later ones coming up for quite some time, so I actually want to spend most of this early part just talking about the challenge, the ideas behind it, and also my personal feelings on this and the experience. I will still likely address the days each and individually a bit later on in the video though, once we've had time to see a bit more of the days. So, I started this challenge with the rules lined out that I set myself, and a hazy idea of what to expect. I mean, I have tried them before, but that was before I shared on social media, and kind of before I really had the time to do one of these. Every attempt, as I've mentioned, kind of died at around day 5 or day 10, since I would typically tend to lose motivation, skip too many days, and I would otherwise become overwhelmed with the other obligations going on at the time. I found that once I missed 2 or 3 days at the beginning, or 2 in quick succession, that I would start to resent the challenge, or I'd see it as pointless given the fact that I had already failed it. So I would stop, move on, and I'd then end up either not drawing for the rest of the month, or it would be a struggle to get back into drawing because of that resentment, and because it started to make me kind of doubt why I was doing it and what the point of it was. In these past attempts, I was very commonly working with the idea that you will see quite a bit with these 30-day challenges. In 30 days, you make 30 pieces of artwork of whatever scale you desire. They can be small, large, medium, and only some challenges restrict the form of art you take and that you make it in. Think of Inktober as one of these examples, where the whole point is that you work with ink. I would be skipping days and failing, whilst then seeing others post another new bit of completed art each and every day. And then I would find that I lose motivation even more, since Most of these times, the challenge would end in burnout really, really quickly. This time, I found that I was determined to avoid that. The simplest approach was the rule about sketching, and by considering a sketch enough for the day. And I actually found that this made myself far more motivated to keep going. I just wanted something every day that I could return to once this challenge is over, and that would be more to explore it to its full potential. I wanted starting points and early ideas. Nothing refined, finished, and done. You'll likely see as we go along here that there are some days where a list of ideas is enough, and others where I simply just write down somewhere to look for pose references, or ideas that may not even tie into this form of art entirely. An example of these cases are day 5 for the first one. I had the theme of moths, and I ended up wanting to design characters based on moths, but absolutely no time that day for any of it, and the process that it would need. So I looked through a book that I had, and I listed out any moth that kind of would be interesting to look at when I get around to this again. On a later day, I had the silk prompt, and I did struggle with that one quite a bit. But again, I came up with this idea of aerial silks, and I just left it as a written prompt with only a brief sketch to note it down as this source of inspiration later. Normally, under any other set of rules or pressure, that would tend to be a fail, but for me, it was fun, better, and still a success. So I didn't really need to doubt if it was good enough, if I'd failed it yet, and I could keep working without losing that motivation that I needed to continue on. By allowing these written notes as well, I also avoided the issue of counting the days that I failed, and I also avoided the issue of having to work out how many of those I would allow before saying that I failed this challenge overall. Yes, in earlier days, it was more about finding sketches that I would want to follow through with, and it was more about these ideas that would be then drawn out. In the early days, day 5 was my first failure. It actually frustrated me quite a bit, and I ended up almost clinging to the later ideas from the idea of moths, just to keep myself going with the ideas and the motivation to continue on with day 6, 7, and later on. Yet, the later I got with it, the more I realised it was the ideas that I had been valuing, and not really the sketches. I actually stopped caring about the sketches in general, since I started to have more days that would have required a lot more refining to be even close to workable as I went. By starting to value the ideas, still keeping in line with Rule 2, I found that I wasn't concerned with the days that I failed quite as much. It became more about simply drawing each day, which I think has a lot more potential than 30 days of finished art. And really, with Rule 2 present, I don't think I would really count any day as a failed day, which also meant that I was questioning less about whether I'd finished the challenge properly, or whether I failed early and just never realised. It took away part of that guilt, I want to say, worry or panic otherwise, around cases like day 5, where I was wondering in a way if it was worth continuing or not, because, well, if I'd already failed at day 5, then I was just wasting my time. But with Rule 2, that wasn't the case. And I really am glad that I put that rule in early, because otherwise I don't think I would be recording this now. See, also, after finishing this, I really strongly believe that it would be better overall to try and simply sketch for 30 days, rather than following through with this idea of 30 finished pieces. To sketch for 30 days is to build a habit of practice, and to get used to the idea that drawing for even 5 minutes a day, loose and messy studies, or ideas rather than focusing on perfection, can be all that is needed to improve more over time, or to kind of develop skills that you want to look at a bit further. It could be one day sketching hands and another day sketching faces, and maybe another on the body and one on animals. There could be days given to perspective and fundamentals that help build later skills, and all of this would be more productive than trying to do 30 outcomes that are just going to burn you out or completely occupy the next 30 days entirely and still feel rushed. By sketching for 30 days, it can also do what I did here, and build a bank of ideas or get you more comfortable with the messy and imperfect stages of development. It can make you think of things that commonly go overlooked and, in general, is a bit more relaxed than stressing needlessly over 30 outcomes. And that was really my main failing in every other attempt of this challenge. I mean, it doesn't even have to be 30 days of unguided sketches. Technically, the challenge can take on the form that I did here, where there are 30 prompts to work on each day, where it can be more about coming up with creative ideas and drawing for ideas you may not otherwise consider. If you want to improve character design, for one example, you could do 30 days of random character prompts or traits to include. For focusing on developing environments, something along a similar vein, just with environment prompts. Just a self-made list of 30 prompts to suit your needs. And hey, if you want to do 30 days of improvement and fundamentals, you can still really make a list for that and a prompt to help to guide you. And that's if you're stuck at all along the way, or if you feel like you need something each day to kind of direct you what to work on. This is really why I succeeded this time compared to others. I let myself sketch, and I found a way to do this that best suited my needs at the time. I know I have said it, but if I tried to do 30 full drawings, then I wouldn't have been uploading this for a long, long time. And I would have got to a point where I would resent this challenge and anything I made up to this point, as I would also be rushing the creative process time and time and time again. I also feel that if I'd rushed along that route and done 30 outcomes, I would have also started to hate any alternative ideas that I didn't choose to develop. Which is an interesting thought, but one that I have noticed before, where I don't go back to an idea because I developed it during this time of resentment and hatred, that I just don't see the idea as worth it or something that I can clearly develop without going back to those thoughts and feelings. This kind of leads me into one of my other points here, and I am trying to keep this as coherent as possible, but I am also rambling a fair bit and going off script every now and then. But it brings me to what I have learned about these 30-day challenges by doing it, as that was the main intent of me giving it a go. The main lesson is that 30 days for 30 drawings is not really sustainable. Art takes a long time, and some drawings are best done over a few days to really be sure that it's to the standard you want it to be at. Rushing the art every single day to finish it in time also isn't really going to help develop other skills other than speed. But then it starts to ask the question that why does art have to be about speed of production all the time? I mean, I know there are some cases where creating quickly helps, but if art is for fun and improvement or pleasure, then why does it need to be rushed? Personally, and by looking into it, these 30-day art challenges actually end up more as posting challenges for social media, where it encourages people to post consistently for 30 days using terms and tags online that would kind of be popular at that moment. And I probably could do an entirely separate video and commentary on all of this with a bit more research into it, but that is for another day. Now, I know though that I have a lot of art content shown to me online. Around October, a large chunk of it tends to be Inktober content from people that I don't follow, or people that I simply haven't heard of before. So, in that sense, it seems like this challenge at that point becomes more about posting the videos every single day and doing it on time. And that seems to be the focus of the 30 days, not really the art. See, one thing that is only really evident when I've been looking at it across the years is that quite a few people will prepare the drawings in advance, or they'll do it in batches and post on appropriate days. Again though, you can schedule a post to go out at a certain time, so it's all about preparing in advance and making it look like you did it that day, just to meet the 30-day requirement and the posting 30 days challenge element. Now, I wouldn't even really say that there's anything wrong with this. It works for people to build their reach, and they are still making 30 drawings for the prompts, even if it is prepared ahead of time. If they do it in advance, then they are more likely to avoid burnout, since it is an unrealistic goal for many to do it any other way. And people do enjoy doing these challenges. For some people, it's simply fun, as I've noticed. So for them to enjoy it and to get it done, then they would need to do it ahead of time. Now, as I have stressed, a full outcome can take hours, and for some people it can be days or even weeks. Yet the challenge can also stress finishing messy drawings and be less strict with the outcomes. But it can, and is, more likely to lead to a creative block for me at the very least. And I am just going to stress that this is more me talking about myself and my own experiences. There are definitely people who do this because it's fun and they prefer working that way. And also, as just a quick note here and completely a bit of a maybe tone shift, but if you are an artist who does a 30-day challenge with full outcomes each and every day, I just have to say props to you, because it's one of those things that I know it's hard for a lot of people, and it's one of those things that for me personally, it is impossible. But if that's the way people work and that's what they want to do, then that is the way that people work, and that is what they want to do. There's no one right way with art, and I'm going to be clear again, this is all just me, my opinion, and my experiences with it. So then, I have mentioned the prep, the rules, the sketching side, and so on. So let's take a moment to look at the pros and cons of this challenge, as I have slightly touched on a fair few of them already. The first pro of this, as I have said, is that it encourages drawing each day and building that sense of consistency to help you develop skills. With the sketches I am doing, it also encourages me to look at various ideas that I would otherwise avoid, and it also builds on a sense of creativity when looking at the less favourable prompts that I set myself. I mean, I certainly set myself some prompts that I would never otherwise look at. By this, I was encouraging myself to look at those range of ideas for words that I don't usually look at. When I started doing simple sketches and rough notes for each word, then the same still applied. I was looking at a range of ideas for the word, and some of them were ideas that just kind of came to me from nowhere. They weren't something that I usually make art around. But there was no pressure to pick the first idea that I had, and to simply follow through with that as it was the first one. And there was also nothing to make me rush with the ideas, and to follow one down one route and get stuck with it. I maybe only did this for one day, day 19, as I wasn't sure what else to do for the prompt that was the word secret, and even then I had quite a bit of fun with that too. It wasn't even too much of a typical idea that I tend to think of, and I still got to think outside of the box with it to make something fun, and I actually really enjoyed it. Day 19 ended up as another video here on the channel, so I do go into that one in quite a bit of depth on what I was thinking about it and the purpose to it. Now, the main con of this process was that it started to feel a bit more like an obligation the further I got with it. There were some days that I wasn't sure if I had time for it, yet found that I would be making time for it regardless. So I would end up staying up late to do it, or I'd be working on this whilst eating, so I'd be multitasking just to say that it was done and done in time. Days like this began to feel more like a chore than others, and I do believe that the ideas on these days came to reflect that as well, as I don't really feel the same excitement for them as I do on days where I had more time and more excitement to work on them. When they feel like a chore, the outcomes come out like a chore. And it was only natural that this were to happen. It wasn't even just busy days necessarily. Now, for context here, we do have 2 dogs in our house, and that was a newer development towards the end of the month and the end of this challenge. It was round about day 26 that we got our newest dog, the second one, which meant that things got a bit more chaotic than they had been in the earlier days. But even before we got the second, our other dog is a border collie, which means that they need a lot of attention and a lot of activity. If I could have had a spare half an hour on some of these days in the schedule, then it would have been great, and I had the choice of spending it with the dog or spending it on this. And I hate to say it, but most of the time I would end up playing with the dog, or training, or generally just spending time with them, rather than doing this. And that was simply because they needed it. When we brought the second one in, it was chaos with them two playing all the time, but also making sure that they were both okay. And making sure that the puppy was settling in given the chance. This is a really long way of saying that if a month is already going to be busy, then it may not be the best idea to add this into the mix, as it does kind of make you choose. Do you keep the consistency with the challenge, or do you look at your other obligations as that little bit more important? I know for me, I really should be sat here saying that, oh, the drawing was more important and I spent most of my time doing this and working on it, and it had my full attention when I had a moment free. Yet the truth is that the dogs came first, and this is a story in multiple situations where I will choose what they need over something like this, where I can always catch up with it. It may sound daft, but if I was busy with a dog and not able to get the challenge done that day because of it, then it kind of went into the pile where I was regarding it as not really my fault, because I have to look after the dogs. Now, to wrap up the cons here, and to stop talking about my dogs before we spend the rest of this video talking about them, the final con builds off the previous two. With it being busy days and an obligation, there wasn't really time to explore new mediums as I had hoped. I mean, I know I spent a fair bit earlier building up that I would be trying new formats and using materials from my shelf that I haven't really touched in a while. But, in truth, I was only able to really do it every now and then. Most of the time I'd ended up doing it digitally since I had already been on my computer, or I had already been drawing for other projects, so it was the only way that I could really slot it into everything else. It was only really after I finished the challenge and a few days later that I was able to meet my wish for other materials, but more often than not, it was more the only way that it was getting done is if I did it when I had my other things open or when I had other projects to work on, and that was whether I did it before or after. I still include the clips though at the end of the video of me exploring these prompts in different mediums, and I think that that is just a bit of a nicer way to end things. Now then, the final pro of this challenge is that it made me look at areas that I typically tend to avoid. I know it sounds ironic given the fact that I made the list, yet when making it, I added on whatever words sounded fun or interesting, and then I worried about the details later to see where it ended up. If I didn't like a prompt, then that was an issue for later me, and I'd just look at it and deal with it when it got to it. Which maybe wasn't the best mentality, it definitely came to bite me quite a few times. But it meant that when I came to create ideas for those prompts, I had ideas that I don't tend to look at. And yes, in some cases it reminded me why I don't look at those prompts. In other cases it made me wonder why I didn't look at them sooner. One example of this is during day 8. The prompt there had been a dragon, which is something rather vast. I personally tend to take references from the idea of the Welsh dragon when it comes down to it, yet that is by no means the only kind of dragon out there. I mean, a Chinese dragon, for example, is almost entirely different from a Welsh dragon, not even having wings in what I have seen. And yet both of them, without a doubt, are dragons. And that's not even the most different between what a dragon can be. So when it came to work on that prompt, there was endless possibilities that I could look at. Yet the one thing that they all had in common was the fact that the idea of a dragon tends to take references from animals when they're being depicted. They are rarely humanoid, and the only exception to this is when it tends to be some sort of fantasy world, where they have human forms or they're part dragon and so on and so forth. Yet 9 times out of 10, the dragon will be a creature or an animal of the world. It also meant though that I had to look at reptiles like snakes and lizards to really work out the base of the dragon before making any other idea or pursuing it further. This really stands out because it is quite rare that I tend to look at animals in my art. I mean, I never tend to have an idea that includes one of them, and then it is still rarer that I would go out of my way to do a study of one or a drawing or something. In all of my time doing art, Animals are arguably the one area that I will admit to kind of neglecting, since I never really developed my skills there and I rarely push myself to draw animals without external factors at play. It was part of Day 8's challenge, really, yet it reminded me again that I don't ever seem to improve on this region, even though I consistently recognise that it is by far my weakest. It is a habit that I've had for a while. I always prefer drawing people and objects, so animals tend to get left aside time and time again. Yet whenever I realise this issue again, I forget to actually work on it until the next time I sit down and realise again that I need to work on it. So yeah, it is something that I will need to improve on and actually do some studies for. Yet it's also kind of a perfect example of how these prompts sort of push me to face what I avoid, and also where I tend to turn away from. I also then this time made a note of it and put it on my desk so that maybe next time I will start to look at animals and starting to improve on them at some point. Fingers crossed that I get to that note and address it before my dog tends to eat it. Wish me luck. But anyway, this challenge has certainly been something. So before talking about the days, I want to address whether or not I would consider doing this again. For my very short and sweet answer, it has to be a maybe. And the long answer is that it's very much complicated and I'm going to be rambling about it for a little bit here. You see, doing this again would have to be done in the same manner as this one where I'm only expected to sketch and generate ideas or build on fundamentals. And okay, this time I didn't really build on many fundamentals, I focused more on creative ideas, yet that is one of the very few reasons that I would consider trying this again. See, if I did it again, then I would also want it to be different, or to have a different focus at the very least. So doing it with observations and basic skills would probably be a better idea if I did try it again than just repeating this mindlessly. But it would also mean that I'd have to repeat the process and give it another try. Now, in the same breath, I can also do that any day of the week. And there's nothing really stopping me from deciding that I want to do that and build it as a habit, rather than keeping it as a challenge that I'm held to and almost forced into once I begin. That means that I don't really see a world where I would have to do all of this again, just to practice basic skills when it would probably be better anyway, to set it more as a general goal to sketch something every day and to work on it here or there. It would make it less of a chore at the very least. I would also say that if I did all of this again, it wouldn't be with the pressure that I put myself under this time. So say that I did decide to do the fundamental 30 days, then I wouldn't try and mind if I missed a day and had to catch up on it, or if I changed a prompt here and there to something that I would much rather do that day. I would also probably allow myself to do it a bit more spread out, and to maybe even plan in a set amount of break days to the challenge, so that I could use one of them to miss a day as I needed to. And that would really to remove some of the pressure, guilt, and again, the whole idea that if I miss a day, I've failed the overall challenge and can't get back into it. But again though, I don't know why I would need to do this again just for that. Maybe, and quite a big maybe, I would do another experiment to kind of see that the effects that this challenge could have on social media, to see if it would increase the reach that I have on places like Instagram. But even then, it would be a little bit unfair at this moment, since I tend to rarely post over there anyway. I do try to, but I am quite bad at it in general. So to really try and do that test, I would have to post now and then on there as a baseline, and add something to use as a starting reference. Then I would have to do this, see how it changed, but also make sure that the change is the challenge, and not just posting consistently or anything to make a proper conclusion. But also, in that sense, I can schedule the posts ahead of time and prepare the drawings in advance. I could also do that as a sketching thing and a fundamental one, but I would have to decide if it is worth it to me to do that. And I highly doubt that it would be enough to make me do the whole challenge again. So I suppose I kinda lied before. Would I do this challenge again? No, probably not. I honestly thought when I started writing this section that it would be a maybe, that I may consider doing it again. But the more that I kind of work on this and expand upon it, the more I'm finding that the answer would be no. I would maybe be more inclined to do a week or a couple of days. I would also be inclined to take 30-day prompt lists and pick my favourite words from them to do 1 or 2 days, since it does make me still look at new ideas. But I wouldn't see the point of doing a full 30-day challenge, finished drawings or sketches, otherwise. I would also much rather get into the habit of sketching for 5 minutes here or there, or trying to draw more when I have the time without a challenge pressuring me into it, and kind of making it a chore to get done rather than something to enjoy, or something to expand on skills I already have. So then, I think we are far enough along that I can talk about the days a bit more, and kind of look in general how most of them went. I mean, I won't be going into this quite as much as I originally intended. I kind of intended the original video to be going through them one by one as the day is shown. But as I mentioned, time with that was a lot. They each had like 3 to 5 minutes and it was massive. And I also started to notice patterns emerging with groups of days that sort of influenced how all of this went and what it would mean. So it was quite repetitive. So instead we're going to go through here with each day, but we're going to keep it brief. I'm not really going to explain the ideas behind each and every sketch that I was doing, not really acknowledge the sketches individually, and more talk about how the day went broadly. And yes, a few of them will be grouped together because quite a few of them did go quite similarly to one another. The first few days were relatively fine. I started day 1 with low expectations since I actually almost forgot that I had to start this challenge today, and I realised rather late in general that it was something to do. I still got it done, realised the date when I was checking my calendar, and it was fairly smooth sailing from there. And I also did this while setting the bar a little bit low to what to expect for the rest of the month. But that was more for myself. If I'd worried too much or kept the bar too high, then I would have failed it. So starting with the bar quite low kind of set the precedent that it didn't need to be amazing or remarkable or earth-changing. It just had to be. It wasn't the worst day of the bunch, but it wasn't amazing and spectacular, which is what I had been going for. I kind of purposely picked the prompt for jar, as it didn't really seem all that much when I noted it down, and I knew that there would be better prompts to come. Yet the attitude here followed me through into days 2 and 3, and kind of a little bit into day 4 as well. They were calmer days and I worked this in between my other projects at the time, so I really wasn't too put off by the prompts when I had been doing work for them. I had ideas for all of them that were exciting and felt creative, but I also didn't have so many ideas that I was racing against time to get it all down on the page before I had to turn attention to other matters. I actually found that I was using this to warm up for drawing for the day, using it to slightly get into the mood for art in general, and also using this to focus a bit more on the task at hand rather than letting my mind wander further than it should. I also got into a habit these first few days of going back to add to an idea that I had for a previous day. It's why on day 4 I did the charcoal drawing based on ideas from day 3, since I didn't have time for it sooner. It did get me alright with the idea of going back to look at different ideas as well, as I could have seen that becoming a bit of an issue later in the challenge. But day 5 is where our challenges first really came into play. I had times like day 3 where I was getting a bit overwhelmed by stuff and so on, but day 5 was where I first noted the issues at hand. See, I wasn't really satisfied with how the prompt was going at that point, and I found that I was just irritable that day for no reason. I wasn't sure what caused it or why this was the case, yet it meant that I was struggling to focus on the prompt, and then I was getting all caught in a cycle about it. I love moths, and I thought that this would be my first easiest prompt, as I expected day 5 would sort of figure itself out in general. Yet it wasn't, and I was then getting further irritated by that on top of the previous irritation, and then I was getting even more annoyed by it all. and the circle just kind of kept going until I took a step back. I also wasn't sure of myself at the end of day 5, since I didn't know how I felt about only having a list of moths to turn to into characters, and that was my final idea for the day. It would become frequent much later, but as I've touched on, for now I wasn't sure if it was a bit too far from my own rules, so I kept going, figuring that I'd see how it went, but also with that little bit of doubt that I may have already failed. Naturally, this went away by the later points. Day 6 continued the hurdle only because of the mood of day 5 and other factors at hand. I kinda didn't sleep at all the night between day 5 and day 6, so it meant that I was far from the best mood. And I actually started to question myself with the prompt list when I saw the word window, as I began to doubt why I ever included it and what ever even inspired me about it. Now, I do believe that if I had slept, I would have had a better time with it and all of this in general, but it simply wasn't the case, unfortunately, so we carried on with the issues and got over it. Insomnia isn't something I'm much of a stranger to, so I was familiar with the idea of just getting on with things. It was still interesting though. These 2 days were the first time so far that this challenge felt like a chore, and again I had feelings of failure and dissatisfaction around day 5. As I've also said, a lot of my other challenges failed around day 5 or day 10, and this was usually due to lacking inspiration, missing a day and never getting back to the challenge, or something as simple as forgetting about it. So despite how well this was going, I realised now that I fell again into the ideas around day 5 that the challenge wasn't going well, or that it was somehow already lost when the day began. I am proud of myself though. This time I worked through it, and I was able to finish this with the hurdles that are still to come later as well. But for now and in these early days, I was just happy with any small developments that I could see myself making. Now, remnants of the mood from day 5 and 6 did push a little bit into day 7 as I started to challenge the list and the words that I included again, but it was gone soon enough as I was able to work through it and work it out. I think it was really just the frustration of not having an idea straight away. I really believe that I just thought the word was strange, and I kind of just had to start working on it anyway, and forget that it was a bit of a weird word that I don't work with normally. I did forget some of the later words on the list as well, so this was another one of the patterns. Entangled, the prompt for day 7, was one of the stranger words that I think I put on there. It was definitely not something I expected for day 7. But it was safe to say that everything kind of worked itself out by day 8 and onwards for a short little bit. This was where I had the prompts for a dragon, and I did have the previously mentioned issues of animals here. But as I also mentioned earlier, it worked itself out rather well and it let me continue without having to worry too much. These feelings then continued on up towards day 10, where I found the words strange again, and also a bit outside of my comfort zone. Yet I pushed myself to work through it anyway until I was able to come up with an idea. Ironically, days 8 to 9 kind of gave me some of my favourite ideas overall for the drawings, and it kind of also inspired a painting that I want to start soon as well. Yet day 10 was then undeniably its own thing. It was a strange start, unusual even. Yet the word didn't inspire much of an image in this. It did, I suppose, as I considered maybe following through to draw people using instruments for magic. Yet the main idea was instead for world building, where I thought that it would be interesting to work out how the magic system in my fantasy world would maybe tie in and incorporate music with it, and what would be possible. It also got me thinking about how music would tie into magic in general and be used alongside it, and kind of how people would want to use that if they had the ability to. I mean, I did have to work out if magic works to guide and channel or control music, and how that would be done and how strong it would be. Then I had to work out if it simply worked alongside magic, so more like someone would have to be using their magic whilst playing an instrument at the same time, and if that was even a viable route. If done this way, it would also be for more special effects and to add to the performance. Whereas I figured that the first route could be closer to what I understand a bard to be, where the music can do a lot more than just sound nice. Yet I ramble and I'm getting sidetracked. Day 11 was then fairly normal, yet it came to remind me of a practice exercise that I forgot about a little bit ago. You see, the prompt was cloud, and I very strongly remember this scene from the beginning of Kiki's Flying Delivery Service, where she's lying on a hill with the clouds in the background. The practice is then to look at movies and TV, to look at composition, value, contrast, and also colour, to work out how it can be used in your own work, and kind of use the things around you to inform how you do things. It was also good that I remembered this, since I did reuse this on day 29 with the idea of movie itself. I brought back the practice, like from day 11, and I considered this as part of the day, but that is to come up in a short while. Day 11 also saw me looking more at the fantasy world with some ideas, as it gave me an excuse to work out part of the world's religions and myths, and that side of the culture in a bit more of a visual way. And that is something I have been overlooking as of late. Now, if up to day 11 had been a lot of strong ideas and kind of going well, then I ran out with this around day 12. It was kind of a repeat of day 5, where I have worked with the prompt so many times that I almost assume I'm going to be fine with working out new ideas for it. I still rule out working with ideas that are too close to projects I've done before or in the past. Yet, especially here, that unbroken rule caused quite a bit of hesitance around what I would be doing. Now, taking a moment here, this actually applied for most of the prompts that I assumed would be easy, because I've drawn for them before. I mean, if I work with them frequently, then surely they would be easy. But because I wanted something new, and not just a repeat of an old idea, I found that I would get stuck and lose inspiration for it, since I have worked with them in so many different ways. Day 12 was bones, and when I started the challenge, I just finished a large painting where the ribs are rather central to the idea. But it meant that I wanted to avoid things like this, and things like the ribs, or something with such an exposed and open chest. And that is then the more common area that I work with on skeletons, so I was getting quite stuck with all of this. But with that said, the days leading up to the halfway point, day 15, had been a mix of back and forth. As I've just kind of covered, day 12 was a nightmare, and I worked it out eventually. Yet the half hour that I had been working on it somehow felt like an hour or two at some points. Yet I then found that day 13 was rather simple and easy. It actually came out with more than one idea, and the time that I was doing it all kind of flew by, so I didn't even really know how long I spent on it until much later. But then day 14 was right back to the headache region. Though that may have also been my fault. I'd given myself the prompt Hollow, when I happened to rather enjoy a game called Hollow Knight by Team Cherry, which meant that I could only think of the main character from said game. I did this to myself a fair few times without realising though, so it wasn't ever a lesson learnt. The other instances of this had been day 16 with the term Silk, where I mostly looked at Hornet from Silk Song, and then day 27 where I managed to resist the urge to draw a Guardian from Breath of the Wild. I think I also did it with the term Lace somewhere along the line, but I also managed to resist in that instance as well. But day 15 was undeniably the midway point of this entire thing. Now the best part with this is that I didn't actually realise this until around day 18. I just kind of continued with day 15 as I usually would, and it was a bit of an iffy day, but not as bad as it could have been. I then don't think that I wanted to acknowledge what day it was during day 16. This was arguably the day where, if I was going to quit, I would have. I ended up hating the Silk prompt, and I had no idea what to do with it or where to take it, and I actually spent most of my time doodling Hornet until I physically couldn't add anything else to her. And that just meant I had to look at the idea at hand. It was eventually, after a lot of struggling and suffering, that I ended up with the idea of aerial silks, and by that point I wanted nothing else to do with the prompt. I called it done with the one sketch and the written idea, and then I kinda just got it out of my sight as quickly as possible. And that was before I could call off the entire challenge and pretend that I never started any of it. Safe to say that day 16 was not a good day. It sounds drastic, I know, but it was also frustrating me, and I had my dog running riot just as much as he could. He wanted to go on a walk, he wanted to play, he wanted attention, and he wanted everything. So when I called this done, I did so on the excuse that he was standing in my art room's window, basically begging me to go and take him to see the other dogs outside. He's super friendly, which is why we actually got a second dog, but this was before we picked up the second. So it kind of worked out that I was able to give him attention for the rest of the day, but maybe not so much the best thing for this art challenge. But from there, days 17 and 18 were fairly plain sailing, and I managed to avoid the curse of day 16. Day 18 saw a little bit of the curse, the one where I used the prompt so often that I struggle a bit more with it. Yet I do believe that it worked itself out in the end regardless, which is what I was trying to do. Day 17 was direct, as light is more an aspect of a drawing, and using it as a central theme is also something I enjoy. Now, this sounds like they're very similar. They're both prompts that I have a lot of ideas for, use often, but there is a very slight difference between these two. Light as a prompt is something that I usually only have ideas for, and it is rare that I even sketch them down, let alone develop them. Lighting is a part of another idea for me, and if I do like an idea where it's based on light, I have a really bad tendency to forget to note it down, so it never happens anyway. For example, I once had this idea for light and a sketchbook nearby, but in the 2 minutes that it took for me to find a pencil, the idea was gone, and I wasn't sure where to even start with it once again. So day 17 was a prompt that I commonly have ideas for, yet rarely work with, so that I could note down any and every idea for it, without the issue of repeating something done before. Now, day 19 was then the outlier. I have gone on and on for most of this video about how I wasn't working towards finished images on the same day, and that I did kind of prioritise ideas over anything else. Yet day 19, I ended up developing the sketch and flat colours of one idea, since I didn't really have any other appealing ideas for the theme of a secret, but I did still want to work on it for the same amount of time. I liked the keyhole idea and the narrative of a person prying, and I didn't really see the value of wasting my time with ideas just to kind of get it done and to create a bank of them, when I wasn't excited for any of them. The only reason I would have done any of that was just to remain consistent with the challenge. I mean, it did prove my point though. I really only had this to work on for day 19. Well, this and some smaller other tasks. But I still didn't get it finished. I found that I still needed it to sit for me for a while, just to kind of decide what I wanted it to be. And it still took me longer than a day. It's why for day 19 you only see the sketch. It's then in later days that you see the flat colours, the finished outcome and all of that kind of occurred a couple of days later. It's like in this entire process. I have certain sketches on certain days that I like the most for that day, and when time allows it, I do plan to go back through and develop those that I want to, and I have done so already with a few of them. And these are usually the ones that I feel like working on as I went along, just to kind of see how it would end up. I didn't need to worry too much about it or fuss over finishing anything in one day, and the process of those sketches is then seen in line with the day that I worked on it and finished that stage. For example, the finished idea from day 3 is then seen on day 16, because that was when I did that work. Now, from then on though, I was in what I have been calling the final stretch, where I have 10 days left and the end is in sight. It almost made a lot of these days harder, but it also made some of them easier at the same time. Day 20 was then on the easier side. The prompt is one that I like, and it didn't take too long to have a sketch that could be worked with, and maybe changed almost entirely, to kind of work out something in line with the theme. Eyes are just one of those things that I've doodled endlessly, and I've drawn them a lot before, for many different reasons. But I also, at this point, had the push and the energy from being within the final stages of this challenge, and that kind of helped me get it all done and dusted before having to worry too much about the final details. At this point, I wasn't struggling for ideas just yet. All of this continued over into day 21, where time as a prompt is something that I almost work with once a month at this point. It is one of those things that has interested me since the start of high school as far as I can recall, and maybe even then it was a bit sooner than that too. I've explored time through the idea of seasons and how the world changes, and I have also looked at it through people and their lifespan. I've used time for images of life and time for those of death. As I actually write this and record this, I'm even planning out an entire series of ideas for paintings that centre on the idea of time, death, life, and simple existence within all of it. My only boundary this time was to look at a more literal depiction of time, so that I didn't get too carried away with the conceptual idea and how it can be depicted there, as that is also where I usually tend to work. I had to make sure that I could fit it all within the time that I had, since, following day 20, the days were then steadily getting busier again, since it always seems to happen around the turn of a new month. So it means that on day 21, I had more ideas than I did time. From there though, the time that I had for each prompt began to shrink and decrease more each day. I had to do more in less time and still make it work. On one of the following days, I have forgotten which, I started it at 11:47 just so I would still be considered it as starting on the day, even if it passed midnight. Starting it on the right day means that it doesn't count as catching up, you see, so I can still say that everything was done on time. Yet day 22 wasn't midnight day. It was actually a fairly strong day despite all I've said. You see, I have the perk of having two main friends that are both really interested in space in very different ways. One of them likes the actual mechanics of space, and things like gravity and stars forming, and all the way that it works without intervention. The other is then very interested in the mechanical side of things, and the way that the space stations work and the rockets and everything else more on that side of it. So all that means is that when I think about looking at space, I have two people to ask who will very happily talk about it for hours at a time with me. It's why I kind of had so many ideas and why I made so many written notes for this theme. I mean, I am very inclined to do the idea of characters based on planets and stars, but I would be needing to research it before sketching any part of that. I then had some other missed ideas here and there, but it was a very fun and very easy day. Now, day 23 is that other example of I can't stop thinking about games that I play and this is affecting my work. Since the term lace once again made me think of Silksong and the characters of Farloom. Other than this, we were maybe getting more into the rockier days of Challenge's End. Today felt like it was so slow because the end is in sight, but I had no ideas for this beyond the character Lace, and I had no clue where to take it from there. I eventually worked out something, but it's still a very hazy idea that needs a lot more development. And it was definitely kind of a push to call it a sketch. It's definitely more of a written note to include Lace in that character's design. But it made me glad that I wasn't too worried about full finished sketches and kind of continued with the point of the challenge. But it was certainly a rough day getting near the end of all of this. Days 24 and 25 were then fairly similar. It felt pretty good. I hit another milestone with only 5 days after it all to go, but I also found that the busier days were starting to get in the way of things. Day 25 was a strange word, but it still got cut short by other tasks at hand, since it was kind of needing to be done around other bits of work to do. And I needed to do most of it before the end of the day, or I could continue on with the drawing and rush the later tasks, regretting the choice of doing the art, or I could do the art and it was all over the place. Safe to say that I let the drawing be cut short a little bit for the favour of other work at hand. Again though, this is a similar story for days 26 and 27. Both of the prompts were very strong, and they both had strong hand of ideas that got cut short due to time, and that alone. I still had ideas I liked for them both, but felt that if I had just a bit more time in the day, I could have maybe done a bit more with it all. But day 26 was when we brought home our second dog, so the rule for the next couple of days had been chaos and constant distractions. I mean, I was doing all of this around the dogs napping, other people watching them, and even then when the younger one slept, the older one would still want to play and want more attention, and we kind of had to let him. But that was no issue, and it just kind of meant that the drawing got cut short, as, politely, I know I touched on it before on another day where the dog was distracting me, and I know that I chose to do this challenge at this time and all of that, and it is a video here. But I still had to look after the dogs, and do that to the best of my ability. I didn't really want to lie and spend days coming up with sketch after sketch for this later part of the challenge, and I also didn't want to claim that it was all amazing and productive, and that the final push of energy from the final stretch made such a difference. Because ultimately, this is the truth. The challenge and my experiences were just not that case. I had a bit of energy, but I also had more distractions. I had to fit all of this in with my day, which means fitting it around the dogs and the other obligations in the house. So then that brought us up to the final 3 days. These were all fairly similar. They were slotted between the to-do lists, and I made it work with the time allowed. The prompts weren't really bad or hard, but I did have a few issues with some of them, which is really just expected at this stage with it all. I realised that for day 28, I'd done the prompt across so many other days that I struggled to create new ideas for it. And I also was trying to create something that hadn't been seen of it yet, but also not seen in this challenge. I think I managed it, but I still ended up favouring the floating ideas from days prior to 28, more than anything that I created on the actual day for it. It might just be a thing with my creativity, it might also just be the fact that I'd worked with it that many times that I almost didn't want to create anything new with it. The other days can apply to this one, and that was just going to be the case. If need be, I'll create a set of the floating ideas, and that was the idea for day 28. Okay, yes, I already had all of the other sketches set up and all of that, so it was a little bit of a cheaper idea and an easier way out of it, but that was kind of what I needed. Day 29 was then another day where the drawing from a movie as a study route came in quite handy. I did that for most of today, as I used this to classify it as movie. I wasn't sure beyond that route, so it was really the best starting point that I had, whilst I needed something down on the page to at least stop myself getting too stuck with it. It was day 29, second to last, and I was almost getting stuck in that mindset too that I couldn't fail that challenge now. I couldn't miss the day and I just needed to get something done. Admittedly, if I was following the rules of a final sketch for each day, I would have actually failed at this point. I didn't end up with a sketch today that I would see myself continuing, since the sketches I managed were drawings from movies, and I personally don't enjoy recreating things like that in full detail for detail. I really only enjoy doing them as sketches or a study, really. Instead, my idea to continue was to actually develop a new skill that bit further. You see, a while ago, I looked to try animation, and I have since been including small parts of it here and there in different drawings. I do this as I find it fun, and I like the moving elements, but I've never really tried to do it with something more. The most was a school project that I ended up losing passion for, since I had the teachers telling me to do the opposite of what I wanted to do, and that also saw me putting animation on hold for quite some time, as I didn't end up enjoying that project, because it wasn't what I wanted to do. My idea here is to bring it back, to sit down and to actually try and work out how to do what I want to do with it, and to just give it all the time that it needs. So the movie is a bit of a loose tie, but it's one to get me to develop the skills so I can use it for a story, and also so I can just learn the basics with it once more and have a new skill to mess around with. That then only left us with day 30. Overall, I think we left it on a high note as well. I was happy with the idea of night, as it is arguably my favourite time of the day in general, and I have plenty of ideas for it. I could doodle, adapt ideas from previous days, And it was one of those prompts that I had no issue with it at all. I had fun by changing the background to black and working in yellow, and I spent some of the day working out how I wanted to present the overall file that I kind of had all the digital sketches in, as I kind of wanted one place for the full 30 days. I did decide that a simple layout was best, but overall I just had fun with it, and I could enjoy the simpler process for the final day, rather than arguing with it or struggling until the end. Now, with that being said, my version of the challenge won't just end here, or be left as something like this. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense for me to create all of these sketches and all of these ideas, only to leave it at this point and to never pick up any of these ever again. I could do that, but it feels like a bit of a waste, when I have already noted that I didn't make it through as many drawings that I was hoping to get through for this month. So it only feels right that I address where I plan to go from here. I have ideas all over the place, and some aren't simply for drawing on their own, and some just don't apply to a visual form of art. I have ideas that expand upon my fantasy world and can help me build up smaller regions of that, or act as ideas for towns, rooms, characters and all sorts. I have ideas that add to my private story that will also help me build up the characters there and further consolidate details that I want to do over there. But I also have conceptual ideas and narrative ideas, some that would adhere well to animation, and others that would do better as a canvas painting, and so on and so forth. In other words, my ideas are all over the place, and they truly feel rather limitless, with the end of these 30 days giving me more than I could work on at a single time. I have ticked off some of the drawings, gotten one of the flat colours and no further, but I need to take a step back from everything and kinda get all of the ducks in a row. My intent from here is to make a list, one that I've started, and that's just to note down sketches that suit various needs, and kind of make piles of work to address and break matters down more than they currently are. For an example of this, I want a pile of narrative ideas, the drawings that have self-contained stories going on, and then another pile for conceptual ideas. I have ideas for the fantasy world that can be put in their own little corner, and another story that will stay adjacent since not all of them are strictly for said story, and they can also be applied in a range of ways. But I'll keep my animating ideas to one area, and then also make a note of everything for Noctovia's development, as that is coming along quite nicely, and it is growing into its own thing more than I expected. This is a bit off topic, but also on topic, because this challenge gave me time to talk and time to think about things. But it might be that Noctovia would become separate from this art channel at some point, as it is growing a fair bit with stories and ideas and things that I want to do with it. But that is a decision that I will make, as I kind of have been thinking about it, and I kind of will have to see what it needs. If I did decide that, it would be so that everything can be kept in order and have their own little spaces to breathe. But it is a bit of a tangent here, and something that I will need to think about before I talk about fully. But it is kind of related to this project as well. This project gave me a chance to think about quite a few things, and to sit and look at all sorts of matters that I might have been avoiding recently. It lets me breathe, and it lets me reassess and do the tasks that I need to do away from art, and also kind of gives me time to come to conclusions about quite a few things that I've been debating. I have a better idea of what I've been enjoying lately, things that I want to try and share more of, and ideas that I want to improve on for my own sake. And it'll sound really daft, but this brought a lot of it to light. Don't get me wrong, I have done all I usually do as well, but it kind of lets me think between days and work out how I feel about going to a few new things and doing new things. Others, it lets me see that something is wrong, but I'm still working out what that feeling may be. Now, the other thing that I did after this, other than making the lists and the planning and all of that, was to explore the materials that I didn't get the chance to look at during the month. These are the clips that are at the end of the video, one without the day marker and any sort of number, where the only goal was to avoid leaving this challenge feeling bitter or unfinished. I wanted to experiment with materials at the start, and then I didn't get the chance to when everything else played out. I could have left it there and simply complained about it in the script, claim that there was nothing to be done about it and to call it a day and move on and wrap it up. But I don't quite see the point in that. Not this time at the very least. I've already made every other rule for this challenge, so what's one more? The challenge is 30 days and I've shown what I did in those 30 days. I've been honest about where I got to and how I feel for each day and what I would change about it. So why don't I use the time that I have now to show the improvement of said issues, and to actually do something about it, and to show the creations that I wanted to make a bit sooner. I wanted to do it and I found the time outside of the 30 days. Yet, personally, it still kind of feels like part of those days because it's the time that I was working on this video for. So that's kind of the loophole that I'm using to include it all. It was also just a nicer way to round out all of this, and to see if those materials would have made much of a difference to the challenge and its outcome. But the most important part here was Rule 4. I had fun with it, and that's what matters most. But anyway, that is then the challenge done and everything wrapped up and finished off. Well, I actually do tell a bit of a lie there. Almost nothing is finished from this, and there are sketches in piles to address when time permits. There are also some ideas that I will never touch again, and some that will change entirely before being complete, to a point that I don't even really consider them as quite existing yet. The foundations are certainly there, the very, very early start, but those ideas won't really remain recognisable compared to the final version of them. And despite this being the end for today, I find this lack of completion almost better, strangely enough, when I am wrapping up this 30-day challenge. There's just kind of more to look forward to, more space for ideas to shift and to bend beyond what they are now, and I don't really need to worry so much about the outcome and the feelings for them. I may have aimed to finish more drawings this month, thought that I may have completed about 5 minimum, and maybe even more. Yet the truth is that I did what I could spare time for, and I still had 2 drawings this month from this challenge alone that I could complete and I had the time to complete. That's still 2 more than I would have had otherwise. Now, most of these sketches are still then not limited in their potential. I could really wake up tomorrow and decide that I'm going to develop half of these sketches in some medium that I've currently never ever even heard of. And if it sounds fun to do, then let's give it a try. I could do it all digitally, make a painting here or there, and there isn't anything to really stop whatever way I choose to take it from here. If I so desire to, I could look at crayon and charcoal and felt tips. So there's nothing saying that I have to do any of these in one certain way. I could then also combine prompts, which I did mildly touch on during some of the days in the challenge, but I could also combine these with other ideas not yet thought of. There are then other prompts kind of prompting me to research things that I would otherwise have no need to look at, which is sure to then end up leading me down some sort of other rabbit hole, and that will kind of give me all sorts of new ideas and understandings for world building and art combined. Now, for me at the very least, art then isn't only fun because of the outcomes or the finished products, and I do find that I can sometimes get a bit lost in all of that. In truth, there have been things that I've done where I much preferred it at an earlier point of the development, or where I had more fun with the idea than seeing it done. Instead, I tend to find enjoyment in the process and with sharing it and talking about it. Coming up with that really early starting point and seeing the decisions being made along the creative process, until you have something that, for this moment, portrays what you were thinking of, whether it be a story or a feeling of a concept or something entirely different. But then also being able to see how this moment compares to something before it can then be one of the most rewarding elements of art, and it is partly why I started to create in the very first place. For the sketches, I then kind of like seeing how they come together from a simple idea. I like it when I have such a clear image in my head of what I want to make, that the outcome can then mirror it or reflect it in a sense. Granted, there may be a feeling of frustration when a sketch doesn't quite match the idea as seen in my head, But that too is something part of making the idea and seeing how it changes from that conception to later. And that's also why I say that it can reflect the idea in a sense, because it will change along the process and it will develop and kind of evolve. It's then extra fun starting with a concept only, and then taking that and breaking it down further and further to the fundamentals, until a drawing with a theme presents itself that captures these ideas as I wish. Others come to be and tell their own story before I work it out myself, and all of these can then be interpreted entirely different between two people. This is where the fun lies in creation. It isn't the outcome, and sometimes that is just a really nice side effect of the process taken to make it. Other times the outcome is the goal, and it's a continued joy of the creation process. I like making and I like doing it myself, and then I get to look at the outcome as a product of that, and kind of what it all led to. And I know me rambling about this may seem like a strange tangent for this conclusion, yet it was part of this challenge that reminded me about this. By focusing on the sketches only and not really worrying about finished outcomes each day, it reminded me to take time and to slow down, and to really look at the start of the process without feeling that obligation to then rush ahead with it. And this challenge gave me ample time to remember that and realise it, and I could just enjoy it as I needed to. It let me look at the sketches and the ideas themselves and not fuss too much over what it could be just yet. All of that is for later. It lets me look at parts of the world in my stories that I've overlooked, and I simply get things on a page to come back to later. If this isn't a satisfactory ending to watch, then I do apologise. Most of these may end up as future videos though, and I will be taking my time with it, but it's something to look forward to if there's one particular idea that you really want to see complete. Anyway, for now though, I think that I have rambled on and said all that I can and all that I need to. I do truly hope that you've enjoyed it so far, and that you don't mind the longer video and the longer format. I really don't know why, but before starting this, I thought that I could wrap all of this into 30 minutes. Maybe 45 at the max, if I was lucky. Yet that was very quickly proven wrong when it came to actually putting it together. And this is version 2 of me doing this format. The other version of this saw me spend at least 3 to 5 minutes on each and every day, and really to get into the thoughts of it and the process and the drawings. And that was never even really getting around to the matters of the challenge and how I felt on it, and really half of what I was actually then able to say today. It all focused a lot more on the day, the feelings, what I was thinking with each sketch, which ones I liked, which ones I didn't, and I kind of was thinking that I'll just save all of the kind of how I felt about the challenge elements to the very end and address it when I needed to. But in saying all of this and at the same time, if you do like the longer form content and want to see more of it, be sure to let me know and tell me what you think. I have quite a few physical paintings planned, and I'm sure that those will take longer formats when I get into all of it, as they just tend to take me longer in general. And also they have a lot more back and forth involved with them than I usually get around to on here. But for now though, I hope you have a wonderful day and an even better week. I will be sure to see you all next time, but for now, goodbye!